So, good evening and welcome everyone to tonight's Regeneration, Culture, Environment and Overview Scrutiny. Firstly, I would like to welcome Councillor Vi to this committee. First item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm covering for Councillor Filmer.
Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, I'm subbing for Councillor Anima Sean.
Excellent. Councillor Halcroft-Scott.
I can't remember who I'm subbing for.
Eddie Peake.
It's for Councillor Peake. It's Councillor Eddie Peake, the whip.
Thank you very much, all. On to the next item of business. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 26th of February 2025 as correct? Thank you very much. Next item, are there any urgent matters? Okay, thank you very much. So, are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we are now on to the attendance of the portfolio holder for economic and social regeneration and inward investment. So I would welcome Councillor Mayhill to introduce his report.
Thank you, Chair, for the invite and the opportunity to come here to be held to account. I will leave as much time as we can for actually being held to account. So what I will do is cover very lightly what is in the report, but largely it will be taken as read. Hopefully the report is clear as stated, but I would like to place on my record the thanks that I have to all of the staff that are behind the scenes, and sometimes not behind the scenes, out there front and centre, meeting with businesses and doing all the hard work that is contained in this report. So just very briefly, I'd like to cover what is incorporated into the report, which includes the areas that are covered by my portfolio. In section 3, the larger sort of strategic frameworks and the funds associated with the portfolio. Section 4, the challenges and the various projects that are included. And then chapter 5, which is how it essentially relates to residents and businesses on the front face. And then 6, with the key areas, starting with town centres, small businesses, investment, and the grant funding and how it's spent, and then ending with the strategy and social regeneration elements. So hopefully that covers an outline of what's included, and I'm open for any questions about the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, can I ask Councillor Mayhill to move closer to the mic or speak up? It's very difficult to hear you. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Is that any better? Yeah? No, hold on. Let me just. There we go. I like to lean back, so I'll do like so. Would you like me to go through that again? It was quite short, and I think we could. If you would like me to go through it again, it'll be fine. Okay, no worries.
Okay, thank you. I'll just start with just one brief question or just an invitation. Obviously, the portfolio for economic and social regeneration and inward investment is quite a key broad portfolio for the performance of Medway. So I was just wondering, almost in the way that quite often people review a proposal or business plan, what do you think in terms of our local economy and our base in terms of being able to achieve regeneration investment, what some of our strengths are, some of our weaknesses, and potentially some of what our opportunities are, but also what are the threats to Medway and its economy?
Well, thank you, Chair. You want me to do a SWOT analysis of You're supposed to make this easier. Okay. All right. Well, so look, a SWOT analysis can be helpful. I tend to sort of break it down instead into sort of what are our natural advantages, and Medway has many, and there are certain things that we really can't do anything about. So some of those things are fixed, like our geography, the land, the current infrastructure that we have, and also the perception of Medway. So what Medway sort of is known for, what's expected in Medway. So starting with that, and I can sort of hopefully intersperse some of the SWOT analysis within that. Medway, I think, at least how I see it and how I think it should be seen, and the advantages of seeing it in this way, should really be the industrial reflection of the rest of Kent. So you can think about what does that mean for example, food production, food transport, where that's a growth sector in Kent. What role do we play in that? And there are sort of spin-offs from that. For example, how does AI play a role in food production from farm to fork, especially when you've got a whole ready-made sector that is actually quite data-friendly. So that's certainly an advantage that we have. The access to other areas not in Kent include London as a gateway is how we should view it, and not as a satellite. So there is a danger, and maybe this is a threat, there's a danger that rather than being seen as a sort of a gateway to London and leveraging sort of that geography, what will be used for is more of a satellite and as a commuter town, which is something that we need to, in my opinion, fight against as strongly and as vociferously as possible. We have other strengths, for example, our 3 universities, which can be leveraged much more. There's a lot of growth in terms of investment, but also in research-led growth with our universities, and we're seeing the beginnings of that with the creative sector. And actually, if we want to talk about another advantage that we have is the creative sector, but that's not necessarily fixed. We're also close to potential power generation. If you look at sort of the various interlinks and the interconnectors that are being proposed out in the peninsula, what that would allow us to do is to really develop on, have access to a much better quality steady power from a lot of French nuclear reactors and a lot of green tech in nearby sort of offshore wind farms, and that allows certain things to build from that, like data centers, and of course our biggest fixed asset that we have is our river, and it's probably the hardest thing to leverage and to make use of, because river infrastructure is notoriously expensive, but there has to be a start to that. Then sort of looking at things that are sort of not fixed, I tend to think of like the skills, the capacity, the capability that we have. So we have a strong creative sector, and that's not just sort of, you know, an aspiration, it's actually happening. So there are sort of, including the docking station and other developments, there's a strong creative sector in Medway, and we need to be able to tap into that. There's strong connectivity that we have. So for example, if you compare, and this was, I went recently to the Thames Estuary Growth Board meeting where they talked about connectivity. It was a fantastic workshop, but their main issue with connectivity was actually the lack of broadband and lack of high-speed internet access for startups was a limiting factor in various parts of the southeast. But in comparison, Medway's connectivity is not that bad. It actually is better. So that's something that we can leverage. There is a high proportion of traditionally, there is a high proportion of self-led businesses in Medway. So a lot of sole traders, a lot of smaller businesses. So what that means is there's a real positive mix of people with lots of skills. There's also, we have a positive mix of people from different backgrounds. And I don't mean that sort of in a performative way, which is the usual criticism when anyone talks about diversity. I mean it in a very real, concrete sense. How would I, like for example, as a private individual, if you said to me 10 years ago, oh, Harinder, you'd be opening up a Nepalese restaurant, I'd be like, a what restaurant? I'm not Nepalese. I don't know anything to do with Nepalese cuisine, but actually we have the skills, the people that can actually bring those types of skills to the front in Medway. So there's real talent in Medway that we can leverage, as well as a lot of brownfield sites. So that means we've got the talent and we've got the places to actually to build, to actually sort of move into new spaces. So there is a problem with that, in that not a problem. The potential and the way we have to tap it is that we have to find out what the correct themes are, what the emergent sort of themes are that we're finding in Medway. And AI seems to be a recurring theme, so that's why people are talking about it quite a lot. And how does that relate to Medway? And there's a lot of work going on, sort of how to fix some of that investment in Medway. So that's good. But however, what we can't do is sort of just decide on doing everything. So for example, it was very fashionable in the 90s to say, oh, it's biotech, so let's just do a biotech sort of park over here, and that will solve the problem. It's we have to make sure the sectors that we go into are the right fit, that there's a thematic approach. But the first steps are really to tap into that growth. So we've put in a bid for AI investment growth zone. So I pay thanks to Lauren Edwards, MP, who's put a lot of work into that, as well as our council officers. But then on the flip side, there's also various weaknesses I think that you wanted me to cover, and I would think one of them, and actually it's good to see the next item that you have, is that we have a transport infrastructure that really needs improving. So there is, it's safe to say that the public transport in Medway needs improving, because it inhibits growth if people are not allowed to move around easily. So that's definitely holding us back, and I think it's fair to say other cities are ahead. I think the lack of accommodation is, I'm talking about sort of not the 2 to 3 star level accommodation. I'm talking sort of like 4-star level accommodation, the larger hotel chain, or even sort of event centres that you have in conurbations of Medway size. That's lacking, and that's stopping people from being able to see Medway on a regular basis. Like, think about how many times you might go to larger conference centres and you get to know about that place, and it's an advertisement. So just to end on that is holding us back as well. So, I'll leave it there before I take up any more time. I think I could probably rattle on, but to be fair, it was a very wide-ranging question. Hopefully that has covered some of what you wanted.
No, thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty wide-ranging brief, but it's a useful way to start this conversation. I'm going to go to Councillor Lawrence next.
Hi, Councillor Mahill. Thank you for attending today, and thank you for your report. There's a lot in there. I'm just wondering if the chair has given you a 1-star review recently, and hence his question to get you going. I think the report, there's a lot going on, and the legacy of the previous administration runs through this, because a lot of the things the last administration did will take time to come to fruition. I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, actually. I think the problem is the last, in my personal view, not being a councillor in the previous administration, I don't think we've quite found the golden egg that's going to make Medway super. We're ideally placed between London, and the coast. We haven't quite found it yet, and I don't know what that is at the moment. It's not a political point, actually. I think it's a point that we need to discuss on a wider basis. Just a few questions about your report. I just wonder, how many businesses have you actually been out to visit since you... Oh, first question. Are you enjoying being the portfolio holder?
So hold on, I'm trying to tease out the questions in there. So, golden egg.
No.
Visits.
That was more of a statement. The question is, are you enjoying being the portfolio holder?
Fine. Okay.
All right, okay, fine. I'm just wondering how many businesses you've actually been out to visit, sat down with the boss and talked to him about doing business in Medway.
Sure, no worries. Okay, so firstly, am I enjoying it? Absolutely. Absolutely enjoying it. It's tough, and if anyone's asked me privately, I've been quite straightforward with them. I said, look, no, it is absolutely tough with the challenges that you'd expect with a title that's unreasonably wrong. I mean, I think I have, my tent card's probably like double the size of everyone else's because it is a ridiculous title. So yeah, there is a lot in it. But with that, you get to see a lot of Medway, you get to see a lot of what's going on. It is incredibly rewarding, so I am enjoying it. It does help having that connection with businesses and the ability to sort of say, yes, actually, I run a local business. I can appreciate the difficulties of doing so, but also appreciate why you do it and what motivates you. So, yeah, no, absolutely am enjoying it. In terms of visits, I haven't kept a record, and actually that's a really good point. I should really be keeping a record, if only for selfish reasons, so that when this question inevitably gets asked again, I can list it off. I can say I have literally just came back from Wigmore, visiting a new business just now. So I've just been visiting a new business that's opened on Fairview Road. So that invite was out there and have met. But I would say I try to make myself as available as possible. So I try to visit businesses on a weekly basis. What really helps are when we get sort of forums or fora. What's the plural of forum? Is it fora? Fora. I think it might be fora. Yeah. Fora that allow me to meet multiple businesses at once. So the Medway Business Meetup and the Medway business groups such as the FSB, Invicta Chamber of Commerce, etc. That there are some ready-made sort of fora that I can visit, and so I would say it's in the hundreds if you include that, but sub-hundreds if you include if you take that away and you say, you know, how many have I actually sat down to visit on that real in-depth personal visit. And I would say that the disadvantage of going to some of the more institutional sort of recognised, long-standing places like the FSB and chambers are that often you find the members there are the ones that you would find in other places as well. That those members are motivated to go to those meetings and sign up and have the necessary resources and time to do so, whereas actually, as you'd imagine, going out, reaching to other businesses who don't necessarily or traditionally go to those places, that's where we're making, that's where we'll get the best knowledge. Okay. One of the things that helps with that is, and we're really this is quite uncommon for a local authority to do this, but we have our the business survey, Medway Business Survey, which goes out, which we're actually trying to find out a fair bit of information, and it's currently live now. So if you know any local businesses that can sort of feed into that, that would be very helpful. We're trying to get a wide range of opinions and sort of we're trying to get a wide range of opinions and canvass a lot of businesses. If I have time, Chair. Right, okay, I do.
I've got quite a few questions.
Yeah, no worries. With the
so you keep going.
with the golden egg, no, I completely agree. But there's a danger in chasing a golden egg, and I think what we can do is look at sort of certain areas that are sort of over here in terms of, you know, much further along in terms of their development or their where they want to be in terms of regeneration, and say, oh, all we need is a big company, a big, Netflix has been often touted, for example, and that will solve our problem. The issue is lots of those large companies, high GVA companies, often go to places that have done multiple other steps beforehand. So they've laid the framework, they've laid the investable propositions in front of people, in front of businesses and institutional investors, and they've made the area look attractive. It hasn't quite got there, but they've sold the place and marketed their area before they come along, and so that's the work that we're undergoing now.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Just talking about feedback, 5.1 talks about your quarterly meeting with the Medway, the Business for Medway Board. You talk about lots of invaluable feedback, but you didn't set out what that invaluable feedback is. So maybe in 1 minute, could you give us a bit of feedback that you received from the Business Board so we can have a
Sorry, hold on, which
5.1 on page 15 of the main agenda, of the main report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're talking about the Business for Medway Board?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was at the Chatham Maritime Trust. I'd say around about 25 individuals came to that. So out of that, we had, one of the things that rolled from that was the owner of VT Rice wanted to meet after that. So that was one of the meetings that sort of ran from that, and I think much of what he spoke about is quite privileged. But we discussed what his needs are, as, for his business, and that was discussed in an open way. That was one of the things that came out. The other important thing that was raised was how to make that actual meeting more fit for purpose itself. So one of the discussion points and the feedback was, can we go away and look at, and this yet hasn't been done, the chair's quite busy, so we're trying to set up another meeting. But for the next meeting, we want to change and make the meeting itself a bit more accountable so that it's less of a talking shop, more of a task and finish. So that was a strong piece of feedback, which actually I think is, we take on board. Okay.
So in terms of actual feedback from businesses about the current business environment, what's the sense check you're getting?
So they were very keen on continuing the support that we provide in terms of the one-to-one support. So that was a chance for us to introduce the one-to-one support that we were giving through, which is based at Ascend through Roger. The other bits is they did mention that some of them were finding it difficult to attract the right skills, people with the right skills into the roles that they have. How much of that is the day-to-day sort of affairs of running a business, which is always difficult. Recruitment's always a difficult thing, right from across all sectors. So I would say that was the main thing that was raised. It was a wide-ranging discussion on skills and how that affects them.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot in the report about the Shared Prosperity Fund, and even though they're relatively small amounts of money, what sort of tangible benefits have come out of the Shared Prosperity Fund? And I'm just wondering, do you sort of task officers with going off and seeing how that money's actually been spent once it's been doled out, just to make sure that it's going where we were told it was going?
Absolutely. So with the Shared Prosperity Fund, the fact that it's a relatively small amount of money compared to sort of larger scale money is actually one of the more interesting things about it, because what has happened, because it was smaller than was expected when it initially replaced the European grant. I think the team had to think really carefully about how they were going to deliver this money in the most impactful way. So what they came up with is, I mean, it's an exemplar. It really is. It really is an exemplar of how to make the most impact with that amount of money. So essentially it was a form of microgrants, and it's for social regeneration. The impacts have been meticulously recorded. Now, if you were to ask me, can I back
I'm
them
not
off?
asking you for the... no.
I'll be honest, I can't.
Or maybe some
So-
strategic things that have been achieved.
Of course, the biggest strategic thing is now there's a whole network of individuals that speak to each other, have learned from each other, and the round 1 and round 2 and now round 3 are continuing. Those groups of people still stay in touch, and they have all learnt from each other and have often come back for the second or third rounds after having a lot of success. So as you'll appreciate, knowledge is, tacit knowledge is dispersed. And that is I think it's been the best utilization of tacit knowledge in Medway. That is a very wonky phrase, but if you like political theory, that will mean a lot to you. It is the best utilization of tacit knowledge in Medway that I've seen, and it has been I think, in my opinion, the biggest outcome. But it's going to be the legacy, the continuing legacy of the SPF, which is, I think, it's basically now become a priority for us to continue it, because we can't let this go. It's been done so well. In terms of how that money has been spent, how sort of meticulous have we been in terms of looking at how it's spent and who's spending it and whether it's been spent for the right reasons. I haven't yet seen a team that has done due diligence and follow-up as well as this SPF team. So within the council, they're an award-winning team as a result of that. I really can't sing their praises enough. And if anyone on the committee would like to have visit the team or go through the work and show actually what the process was like, it's very hands-on. I'm more than willing to set that up, and I think actually would learn a lot from it.
Yeah, I think it might be good to come back here with a report on that, just so that we can sing the praises of that game, because I think good work, well done, needs to be teased out, I think.
Absolutely. So if Chair wants to put that forward.
So I've got an easy one for you, 6.1.5. Can you translate that for me?
Yeah, 1 second.
Or maybe an officer can translate it. It's absolutely magnificent council speak or bureaucrat speak. I mean, if these reports, we really want our communities involved in these
give me the number.
6.1.5.
It's lots of R's, so Rain and Reimagined.
Oh, Rain and Reimagined. Yes.
Tell me what's actually going on for the people at home who are watching and have read the report.
No worries. Look, Councillor Lawrence and I, although he's not aware of it, share a mutual disdain of local government speak, and actually just bureaucratic speak just in general. However, it really is what it says on the tin. It is Rain and Reimagined. So what that means, it is a work that started, and it means co-creation. So it's working and starting with the community. So there was the Rain and Reimagined event, which was packed out. So the St. Margaret's Church was completely packed out. And we had traders, we had residents, and we had maps, we had pens, and we're going back down to that dispersed tacit knowledge again, where actually a lot of the information that we need as a council is actually contained by the residents that live on the streets that we want to affect. And so they were there. We had breakout sessions. We had areas of Rainham that were mapped out the whole town centre. We discussed what was good, what was bad, what they could imagine getting better. And actually, thankfully, it's really on the back of sort of work like this. So this is draft. So once again, this is the Vision and Action Plan for Gillingham Town Centre. Oh, right. So that's on the back of the Gillingham Task Force. It's basically a new approach. It's not a new approach. It's
a reimagined approach.
A reimagined approach. There it is. Yeah. It's a reimagined approach of what used to happen, because this used to happen in the 70s as well. and then something killed it in the 80s, but I'm not going to go into that. Yes. And so it really is, it is looking at communities and what communities can say and do. And that might sound like, oh, that's great, you got some words on some paper about what they want.
Can I just make
just to end?
Yeah, okay.
If we are going to get people or institutions to invest in something, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a list of investable propositions, whether on a local level like this in Gillingham, a local level in Rainham when they've got their outputs, or on a much larger level with Medway, where we have our own investable propositions. There has to be a menu, if you will, of various bits that people could invest into before anyone will even look at us.
Look, I was being a little bit facetious, you understand, because I hate seeing things like that in a
Oh,
report.
no,
It makes
no
them
worries.
unreadable.
No,
But
I
I
like
think
the
what's
question.
the key points, really, is we've raised expectation, we must deliver something, and it's got to be delivered in a language that people can actually understand. I think the words, there's an awful lot of we're planning to do, it's a bit like government announcements. They announce X billions, and that's the solution, but actually they've only done the announcement. So I really plead, I believe that you care about this and that you want to see change, but we really must make. I'm going to move on, Chair, because I've got just a few more questions. I really couldn't, I think I didn't count the number of times you said AI, but I remember it was like when Tris Osborne came to the business committee and talked about Microsoft Gold Partners. He said it about 17 times. I'm sure he didn't even know what it was. But we talked about single golden nuggets. AI's been a panacea for everything at the moment. And I can tell you, AI is not the panacea. AI is just a tool. There'll be very few people actually employed in building AI. It's a very, very skilled set. And, you know, what we need to be doing is making sure our educational establishments are creating young people not only with an interest in coding and AI, but also the skills to do it. So I would just raise that as a flag. Also, the number of times we mentioned, sorry, there will be a question. The number of times we mentioned culture in your report. So we've got two nuggets for Medway, AI, and the question on that is how many jobs do you think AI is going to generate in Medway over the next 5 to 10 years? Culture, I think culture, we've done it really well, and I want to see an expansion of a self-financing culture sector, so it's not dependent on grant, and you know when the grant's no longer there, it all falls down. So those two things. Just in terms, the connected point is Medway's unemployment rate. So I'll just refer you to the exchange we had at full council in December. And you admitted amongst all in front of your colleagues, you actually read the Telegraph, which I thought was very brave of you. But Medway's unemployment rate went up 10% in February. We've currently got 6.74% of our 18 to 24-year-olds are unemployed, not doing anything. 20% of Medway's working adults are economically inactive, and I hate that word. I absolutely hate that, but that is the facts. What is it the council can do with its very limited resources to try and turn that around? I'm really worried about the unemployment rate because our unemployment rate's gone up faster than our regional. So if you look in, even we've got more people unemployed in Medway than there are in places like Folkestone now, which has always been, has always had its area. So what is it, what's your plan? And what's that you think you can do to turn that around? Because I think you touched on it, it's about skills, but I think it's also about work ready, educational achievement, aspiration. How are we going to, or how are you as the portfolio holder going to make that happen? And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That is, once again, a wide-ranging set of questions. With AI, I mentioned it at the beginning a few times. I have not, I wouldn't say similar, but I have some reservations about it. You mentioned it as a tool, and that's how the internet was described once. It was a tool, but it fundamentally changed everything. It's still just a tool, but it changed the way that we think and what's possible about what you could do. So it really, and it's not clear. It'll be, if someone could tell you exactly how many jobs that it could create or will create, I would be really suspicious of that number and of that sort of approach. We could come with some best guesses. I wouldn't hazard it. But what I would say is, if we aren't ready for it, then we will be then left behind, and it will be just another just another shift in sort of the industrial sort of landscape of the UK that we just missed out on. And that will, if that happens, then that's to our detriment. So we've got to look at, well, what are our natural advantages that we have? And being where we are, close to London, having a potential site for battery farms, essentially, if planning allows it, that then allows for AI accelerators. So there are advantages that we have, and you're right, everyone's talking about it, and I think that it means that we should at the very least be looking at, well, if this does happen, where is Medway best placed to take advantage of it? I don't think we can just say it's just a thing that's going to happen and be passive to the change. We spoke about culture. Yes, agree, absolutely needs to be part of the lead of the drive to regeneration in Medway. We've made fantastic inroads into cultural-led regeneration, and I would like to thank Paul Cowan and his team and others around that who have really driven that agenda, and that's been really good to see. He often says that actually at every meeting he'll bring up, well, where's culture in this? How does culture fit in, and what role does culture play? And I think that's absolutely right. In terms of the unemployment and how that's an issue, that is something that is being taken seriously at all levels of government. We talk about nationally, and we're talking about how that has become a national agenda, and that's really now driven up the sort of the news agenda recently, with the Labour government really looking and drilling down into why it is we have unemployment levels at where they are, but also looking at long-term unemployment and long-term sick, and how those two bits of the welfare equation relate to each other. And there is a lot of work going on. Fully trust the national government to be able to provide that support locally, but in terms of the skills and in terms of what we can do, I think attacking the hardest, sort of the more, what's the word I'm looking for, the harder to deal with sectors of unemployed population, which would usually fall in the long-term unemployed, or we have a section of veterans or ex-veterans, ex-offenders, people that will really benefit from sort of that focused worker investment. The Connect to Work program is something that we've recently worked on and recently hashed out with KCC. So although it's held by KCC, our funding is ring-fenced there, and so that has been something that is being worked on now, and so we're looking at how to support people into competitive employment, and that includes job skills training, coaching, one-to-one support that will really help us sort of move I want to say sort of like the stubborn number in that percentage, the long-term unemployed. So that focused, targeted work is something that is a good start. In terms of the general outlook of unemployment, there is a lot in terms of what we're doing with businesses, with one-to-one work, and how we can help them grow and how we can help them achieve sort of the next step. So there's one-to-one support for businesses as well, which we would hope would then lead to more employment and lead to more opportunities. There is also the apprenticeship program that we run, and that's not for apprenticeships, that's more for businesses. So that's looking at businesses and seeing how can apprenticeships help businesses, and how can businesses become ready to employ apprenticeships, to take them on essentially. And so that targeted work looking at sort of good quality apprenticeships through the Medway apprenticeship skills program that we have, as well as that the Connect to Work program that we're doing. There are two elements there, but as you would no doubt accept, and I would as well, that is going to be one part of what must be a multi-pronged approach. There's not going to be one thing that's going to fix this. And if we could come up with that, we would have probably done it a long time ago. Thanks.
Thank you for that section. I'm going to go to Councillor Etheridge next.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your report. I shall be gentle with you for the first couple.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's not another baker's dozen here.
Or more. Your report is absolutely riddled with about regeneration, looking after businesses, supporting businesses across the area of Medway. And yet at the previous Regen meeting, we had a representative from the Hopewell Drive Business Centre, where they're not fighting just to try and keep their businesses running. They're now fighting for survival. And the businesses there have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds developing their businesses there and marketing, and people know where they are. Can you tell me what your intention is to try and support those businesses to either remain where they are at a reasonable rent from the council to continue using those units, or alternative sites for them?
I'm happy to meet with them in person if they have particular issues with their rent or any other business issues that they might be having. The report outlines a whole list of not only just the one-to-one support, but the other grants that are on offer from Medway, grants that we're now considering to increase because we have found the ability to do so. If there's anything, it's hard for me to sort of narrow down on any particular issue that they're having. If they want to approach myself or my team, more than happy to sit down and look at what options that they have, that they could have. Thanks.
Thank you. Once again, we're going on the same theme of regeneration and businesses. Currently, we have some major industries out on the peninsula and cliff, which are growing and increasing not only in size, but the amount of business they're doing. Unfortunately, the infrastructure to support them in terms of roads and other facilities is decreasing rapidly. Now, we now know quite categorically that we cannot continue building properties in these areas whilst there is still no infrastructure to support these businesses and the new homes and the existing homes. And I think it's right to say, and for everybody to be fully aware, those businesses and all those areas in parish councils actually support Medway Council financially to a greater degree than most people don't understand. You have the business rates, you have the normal Medway Council rates for all these properties, and of course you have a precept rate as well. So the people there are being taxed 3 times. In addition to that, to the services they actually get in terms of local health or bus services or anything else is absolutely a minimum. How can you ensure that the rest of Medway, besides the urban parts, are all brought up into the same spectrum? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the vitality that businesses bring to Medway, that you'd find no argument from me with regards to that. They're absolutely vital to how Medway is, the employment, the well-being of our residents, to have good businesses, and it's nice to hear that they're growing. In terms of the infrastructure and the housing, now of course strategic regeneration comes under Councillor Curry, which I'm sure when he's will be attending this committee meeting, I'm sure he can go through the strategic development of all of Medway with him. That's no problem. But it would really help if there was, for example, a fund for infrastructure that Medway could benefit from, and wasn't just tossed away so lightly by the previous government. That could have really have helped. And what would have really have helped that is if the previous administration of Medway Council had passed a local plan. And that, I think, would have really benefited our ability with the funds that infrastructure fund like that would have allowed us to unlock. But you're absolutely right, the infrastructure needs to be found and needs to be developed and built on, and businesses need to be kept in mind when we do so. And I've no doubt that Councillor Curry will be able to outline the infrastructure that would be going along with any development in any part of Medway. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. As most members here will fully aware that I was highly critical of my own team, and especially the Regen portfolio holder in regards to the local plan and many other wishes that she never implemented, but we won't go down that route too far. Sticking with the regeneration and now town centres, the town centre in Strood has not been operational, to the best of my knowledge, for at least 18 months now. We used to both attend. And in addition to that, I know I'm straying yet again, but we've just lost our Healthy Living Centre, £6.5 million from Strood itself going to Chatham. And why I'm bringing this to your attention is because my residents in Cliff Woods, out on the peninsula, now have to travel all the way into Chatham if they want part of that health process. Whereas if it was actually in Strood and the town centre forum actually did its job properly and fought for it there, that wouldn't happen. And I say, I know I'm straying here, but it's, once again, I just want to bring it to your attention of the things that's happening in this area that affects quite a huge part of the population in Medway, where they seem to think things just disappear from Strood and from the rural areas into the more urban areas. And once again, I'm looking for some sort of balance of where those services are spread more evenly.
Councillor, I think your point about balance is well made. Often when in an area as large as Medway, if there's development going on any particular area at any point in time, other areas will say, well, it only ever happens there. If we just dial back the clock a little bit and actually look at what was happening in Strood in terms of regeneration, in terms of its of the streetscape and the landscape that was being worked on in Strood, people in Chatham would have said, well, actually, what's happening in Chatham? People in Gillingham would have said, well, actually, where's Gillingham's looking in all of this? And we are now trying to address the long-term neglect of our town centres. So we are working through our town centres one by one, and we are looking at Strood very closely. In terms of, was it the market that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah. The markets are an area that I'm looking at very closely and working with our markets team. What you hopefully would notice in the recent budget was that we had next to no resource to manage markets, next to none. That's what we've been whittled away to. So we have invested in that resource to actually have managers who can actually manage and operate these markets. To have a successful market, you do need to manage them, you do need to grow them, you do need to invest in them. And the first step in that is to making sure that we have that resource. So we're undergoing a recruitment process now. And one of the first things that we'll be looking at is Strood and what we can do in terms of revitalising and looking at, well, how, if a market were to be brought back, how would it be brought back in Strood? The review, if you don't mind me saying, and with your indulgence, Chair, the review has been really interesting. I've learned a lot about markets, probably more than any healthy person should. For example, much is based on how much a goose can walk in a day. Genuinely, that is an actual metric that is used, and it goes back to like King Henry VIII. We're having a strategic review of what are the market rights, what are the licenses that are required and needed, and there needs to be a rationalisation across Medway, across that. And actually, once again, This was underled by my predecessor, Councillor Lauren Edwards, who's now Lauren Edwards MP, but really delving into it and looking at the food, I think it's the Food Act of 1984, and how that will allow us to give us more powers to open up our markets. Currently, yes, it's Rochester Monthly, Gillingham Weekly, and we have some private markets as well. What role do they play? Could they be better supported? How would it rationalise across Medway? And yes, absolutely, Strood would be looked at, and as part of that process, it is part of the market strategy that's being developed.
Thank you, and your indulgence, Chairman, this is my final one. The government has just now approved the go-ahead for the new crossing.
Yes.
We are now going to, in my view, need a task group to look at I can't even say the word now, what the effects it's going to have on Medway. Do you intend to have regular meetings with Gresham and Kent County Council as they exist at this moment in time to understand the full impact on the Medway towns? So that's question one. You can't answer these questions now, I fully understand. I'm more than happy for a briefing note to come through at a later date. So that's the first point I'm starting at. Secondly, people who were around sort of 10, 15 years ago went to Folkestone, saw the massive transit camp that was down there for the building of the Channel Tunnel. We can expect exactly the same on our neighbouring borders for the 5 years work that's going to take place there, which means the infrastructure that in terms of supply of food and other materials, raw materials, is going to be absolutely enormous. Are we happy that we are able to train our own people locally to be able to take some of those skilled jobs or even unskilled jobs that could potentially become available? And then once again, we're now looking at the infrastructure for the traffic, how we are going to control the traffic on the 289 Bluebell Hill through Cuxton as well. And then there are numerous other questions in terms of the training that we're going to provide our people. If we train them to do these roles, are they going to be a general role, or are they going to be specific? Because once that tunnel's complete, where do they go to from then? And then I think from there, I'll leave it there, but there's a double question now, just for you, but also for the chairman who's chatting away up there and not listening. That perhaps we should also invite the Channel Tunnel people here to give a presentation of how they can work with you and with this council and these members and the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to remember all the questions.
Matters to do with transport are
Yeah.
probably best. So the strategic transport, we can always put it as a recommendation for a briefing note on those preparations around traffic. I suppose the question that's relevant to his portfolio is probably around skills, actually. Skills is very relevant, and employment. So perhaps we can, if
I'm happy to
Councillor
answer
Fridge-
on the skills question if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It might be better to make we can recommend a briefing note on that, and there's consideration of a task group at that time. I think maybe we could consider that widely, but obviously we've got to deal with.
So, if I may, Chair. So, look, there's a lot of questions in there that I wouldn't be able to get into the detail as you've already said. In terms of being able to meet with other sort of council portfolio holders or leaders, absolutely. We are always willing to work and talk to whoever it is that we need to get the best for Medway. Already have spoken to Gresham about a great deal of other things. Happy to put this on the agenda as well. I think the broader point I'd want to make is that I'm really, really happy that we finally have a government that's actually taken on an infrastructure project and said yes, and hasn't dodged that. So that's fantastic. And if that can continue in that sort of in that vein, and we don't dodge these really difficult infrastructure questions that yes will cause problems, but the longer we wait, to build in this infrastructure, the longer we're going to rely on crumbling Victorian infrastructure, which we can't do. We just absolutely can't do that. So I'm glad it's happening one way or another. What will then result in terms of managing it, I'm sure that we will absolutely have talks and discussions, or whether it's a task force or whatever form that will take, that will be there. In terms of the skills, once again, I'm really happy to read, as well as the fact that we've taken on this infrastructure project and said yes to it nationally. Nationally, we've also announced 600 million on training for construction skills and training for construction workers. Because what we're finding is a huge lack of skills, not just in the skills that we've already mentioned and spoken about earlier on in the meeting, but skills in construction, which actually has a population that is now exiting work, and there are very few people taking up those roles, and that sort of construction force is just not there in the way that it needs to be. I think in the first 3 months of this year, I think there were like 68,000 construction jobs that were, or 38,000, I think it might have been, 38,000 vacancies. So for us to grow, because it impedes growth if we can't construct, because it supports other areas of growth, we need those construction skills, and we need to make sure, like you've mentioned, to make sure that Medway gets its fair share of our people into those jobs and into those skilled jobs that would actually underpin growth in Medway in terms of construction for future generations. So, yep, absolutely take what you're saying. Wherever I have the power, wherever this administration has the power to enforce that, or to ask for that, we absolutely will. We absolutely will. But what that will look like and which council will be undertaking it, that remains to be seen with local government reorganisation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, please.
Yeah, thank you. And just a request, really, first of all, that we stick with chair as a gender inclusive comment, because we've decided that as a committee already. Thank you so much for the report. I think so much of what we do on this committee is about immediate provision of need. And so much of your portfolio is about creativity, innovation, ambition, and planning for Medway as a whole, and that just came out again and again and again. I think the other thing that came out was that real kind of system leadership and real kind of systemic system leadership around partnership building. And so much of what you're doing in your portfolio is bringing the right people together to answer big questions for things that are really going to impact us in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. And that just came out in absolute abundance. So just huge congratulations for that. There are two particular industries that you've mentioned briefly tonight that I wanted to come back to. One was in 6.3.6 and local universities. You mentioned them in your first initial statement. There's a particular comment there about the agri-tech economy. I was really pleased to go to a conference a few months ago that was looking at that. And I think there's so much there in our relationship with HEI sector. We've spoken about that before in all sorts of ways in this committee, but I just wanted to explore that more around how we're working with that sector in terms of your portfolio. And the second, we've spoken about culture, but specifically looking at heritage. And there's mention around the work there in item 6.1.8, looking at the priority area for historic England and the Architectural Heritage Fund. And I just wondered a little bit more there, because obviously, again, it's a really crucial part of who we are. Obviously, with your previous portfolio, you know a lot about the kind of provision of service in that area, but what that means for us in terms of this portfolio and economic regeneration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. That's once again a broad set of questions, and actually there is a golden thread amongst that. And it really touches on what you started with, in that there is a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what we do in sort of like these 4-year terms as well. What's the immediate sort of thing that we can get. And actually, what we really need to be looking at is what is the long-term benefit of some of the decisions that we're making. And absolutely, that is in the report. It's in the way that the council is working, but a lot of that is now, a lot of it has sort of stemmed from, we didn't have a choice. We were left with a situation where we had to sort of take some really long-term decisions because we had some really pressing issues that we needed to deal with, and a lot of it dealt with sort of large infrastructure issues, so we had to take some long-term decisions to do so. And what that has meant is, where you talk about partnership building, it meant, okay, so we don't then have that money to take these large infrastructure projects or large regeneration projects, and we only have, you know, X amount. How do we leverage sort of that money and add it on with some other money that we can get? Putting it very simply, how do we get more people to invest in us? And we not so much underwrite the costs, but we put forward an amount. And that is what we're seeing in a lot of the projects that I mentioned towards the end of the report, with the Future High Street Fund and the other funds that have been made available. So we put in a little, and then we've had funds that then match or you know, match fund. And so that has really driven that partnership working, in that we don't have any other way to approach this, really. Not really. The times when we had local government that was you know, that was able to pick an area and say, we're going to invest, you know, this huge chunk of money to this whole large-scale project just by ourselves. That's just not there. Although people's perceptions are often that that's what we can do, it's not like that anymore. So that partnership working is absolutely key. It's not just key, it's the only option. It's the only option. And so that's why it works through everything that we're doing as a team. And the best example of that is, like I said, the SPF, the team behind the SPF, and the way that they've leveraged that money to basically do hundreds of things, not just one big, you know, not just one big project, but hundreds of them. In terms of working with universities and the agricultural sector, now that really, and this once again comes back down to the partnership, is best done by scaling up to where we're working with Kent County Council in partnership with them, with KMEP, so the Kent and Medway Economic Partnership, which is really, that's the area for this larger scale work. And the way that's sort of coming through is where the government has asked us through its industrial strategy to come forward with, well, what are your priorities, and give us some propositions that you want in investing in. Now, thankfully, our team, well, they weren't wise to it. They were just ahead of the game. They knew that this was what we needed. And so tribute to Jessica Jagpal, who actually had it ready and ready to go. Fantastic officer who had the investable propositions, and we worked through them. And we have submitted that through to KMEP and with Kent, so that when it comes down to working with universities and working with agri-tech, there are ready-made sites, or not ready-made, but like ready-to-go projects that sort of, at least on the outline, would work. And so, yes, it was unfortunate that we didn't get that that application through. However, if touching back onto KMEP, and that's sort of the way that we're working in partnership, that is sort of, it will be stupid for us as a council for us not to leverage the agricultural businesses in Kent and actually be a part of that in one way, whether it's in whether it's to do with the logistical aspects of that, or whether it's to do with sort of the services side of it, or whether it's to do with any industrial aspect, or you could imagine any transport sort of feature of the agribusiness that we could support. So to my mind, the focus that we made sure that was in the KMEP KMEF, which is the economic framework produced in partnership with us in Kent by KMEP. It was a good thing that agri-tech part was still kept in there, as well as life sciences, as well as the creative sector, and we're mentioned in particular for the creative and cultural sector, which gets me onto the cultural and heritage sector, and that is, as well as talking about the SPF and talking about how well they have done, talking about how the project, the Intra project, and how that has enabled Medway to really be put on the map in terms of how to do, and once it, again, as for Councillor Lawrence, it goes back to that co-creation. It's not just a buzzword. It actually means something where we've ended up leveraging a small amount of money, attracting a larger pot of money from historic England, and then making something bigger than the sum of its parts, because the public came together and they made something, and they identified their priorities, and they're really driving that project. And not only that, the legacy of that is that they've now made a intra-community trust, and that has then enabled us to now be a priority area. So that when I earlier mentioned that when you're looking for, that golden egg, and often you can shortcut to that, but you shouldn't. You need to do the groundwork. This is what I'm talking about. So there is now a, institutional sort of very powerful body that has recognised us as a priority space area. That's because of that groundwork of what might sound quite woolly sort of terms about co-creation, but actually it worked, and it has worked, and that is sort of the thread that's really tying all this work together. By necessity, we are working with more partners than we ever have done before, and we're leveraging as much as we can from the little that we have.
Thank you. Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Marhill. Can I say I really appreciate you thanking the workers in Medway, because they do an incredible amount of work, and your report speaks of the volumes that you've got. Unlike my colleagues opposite, I'm really sad for my ward. 23 years of those guys across there have, caused lots of social and stability problems in Luton. Now, it's close to Chatham, which is being, the city centre, which is being regenerated. I'm really pleased that the government have announced an industrial strategy, but devolution's coming along. So how do you feel that areas that are most deprived, like Luton, and have declined over the past 23 years, thanking those guys, they're not, will come into being their own and looking a bit more like Rainham and Hempstead? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Howcroft-Scott. With the workers that I thank, it's not just platitudes. I really would like to impress upon the committee how great this team actually is in terms of the various teams that make economic development, social regeneration, and skills team. They are, I would say, one of the most accessible teams that I've worked with, and there is so much energy in that in the various teams that make up my portfolio. So I'm not just saying it for the sake of it. Please put in a meeting if you'd like to, just to see what they're doing. I really do think they're the future of Medway as a council, if Medway Council exists. But asterisks. In terms of devolution, which relates to the endpoint there, I think devolution has the potential to unlock the kind of strategic regeneration that we often talk about, rarely see, and where we're now being forced to do things piecemeal in the way that we're sort of having to sort of work with different partners. Imagine if there is a larger authority that we could work within, but more powers devolved down to that authority. that's a much more attractive proposition to funds or institutional funders to be able to work with that. So if you had a small district council, it's much harder to attract that kind of attention to people that, or to organisations that have the funding that we need to make this work. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the potential of devolution and also then local government reorganisation, which are two separate things, as the council leader keeps reminding us. The potential of those two bits that are happening together to be able to, for us to successfully drive investment to areas of most need. So yes, like I said, cautiously optimistic about it.
And if I may, Chair, just one more thing. I really appreciate your team doing so much with the Great White Elephant, which they called the Innovation Centre. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, thank you. I would like to say, as I said in the cabinet meeting, that I don't bemoan the previous administration giving it a go in terms of trying to create a site for innovation. I'm not going to say, oh well, that's not, worth it. That absolutely is. There were other problems following it in terms of when to change and the political leadership required to make the changes that I had an issue with. But it is a good news story that we have with the IPM site. It's just starting in terms of it's obviously it's not job done, but we have sort of hopefully turned the corner, and the news with BAE Systems taking a short lease for the time being is, I think, a welcome one.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit late in the day, but I just want to declare that might be of interest is that I didn't know, but I'm mentoring somebody on one of the schemes on the Art and Homeless International, so I thought I'd just better pop that in. Better late than never.
It's not an approval,
No.
this is a scrutiny, so that's fine. Thank you.
I thought I'd just better clear that up. And thank you so much for your report. I love it. It's, as everyone's saying, it's just hope. And it's already been touched on about the skills and the connect to work. For somebody who has 2 children with learning disabilities that have got are both in full-time employment due to these sort of schemes, I think they're brilliant. I just wondered, we're very good, and this might not even be your hat, but it's very good to get local businesses and everything about employing and doing strategies and looking at skills to employ people with disabilities and health conditions. But are Medway Council also doing internships and supported? You might already be doing it, but I just know that about 10 years ago when I was a Parent and Carers Forum, they were saying this is really good, but Medway Council really need to stand up as well if they want the rest of the community to be working. So I just wondered if that had been brought up and something that people were talking about.
So I would say actually the council's record on internships and apprenticeships is actually quite good. There is, in fact, we have people in the CMT who were once apprentices, and if I was to say take an example of the best example of it, I would say actually if you look at the team under Bob Diamond, if you look at the sports team there and how they run, so many of his team were internships and interns and apprenticeships, apprentices who then worked their way through, and I think it's something like 60 or 70% of his team have come through that route. So we absolutely put our money where our mouth is. Could I say that that's true across all the teams? I don't have that information, I'm afraid, but it's a good one to find out. In terms of the hope that we have in this document, I would say this is more grit than it is hope. We're trying to give us the best possible chance of getting over whatever's coming next, and whatever political side you're sat on, I think everyone's agreeing that there's a lot of changing that's happening across, there are a lot of different political and economic headwinds that are happening. We've mentioned AI. Have not mentioned people breaking down the Western order of the way that we do things since, World War II. There is a lot of things changing. Investment is harder to get, but actually what we are trying to do in Medway is to give ourselves the best possible opportunity, and that is something that we're doing really well. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, can I just come back? When I was talking about the internships, I was talking about reaching out to people with disabilities and health conditions, and if we're we're looking into maybe Mid-Kent College.
So there is an aspect to Connect to Work that does do that. That's just starting. So I can find out more information about that if you would like. There's also the Kent and Medway Careers Hub that does outreach as well, but I don't have the exact information to hand. The other bit that we have as part of the portfolio is Multiply, which is a scheme which is looking at people that have historically struggled with maths and how to incorporate it, but it's actually trying to demystify it and try to break it down to be able to sort of make it more approachable, and that's a scheme that's not necessarily to do with disabilities as much as it is to do with people that have historically not really engaged with maths and could open up new opportunities for them. So I did want to mention it, although it's not exactly related to that question, but there are schemes that we are operating. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Doe, and then we'll probably take a short break after this item. So, Councillor Campbell, please. Your question's been asked, okay. Councillor Doe.
Yes, thank you very much for your report, Councillor Marlin. I think that there is an awful lot of good work going on in here, as I think, and some of which I must say, we did start, and some of which you've added to. But I think that the thing I would like to see more of, if it's possible to do this, but I would like to see much more in the way of statistics so we can measure our success more effectively. Because if someone were to say to me tomorrow, oh, I come from this shall we say, the west of London somewhere, the same sort of position as we are, only the other side of it. Are we more successful than you are, etc., just to sort of see how we're doing, if you understand what I mean. And I think that information, although there's a lot of what I call anecdotal information in here, and it's very good, but I think we need to be able to measure that. And of course, that is something which then we can probably measure better when we come to actually be competing for funds as well. I think that's one thing I'd just like to suggest. The second thing is, of course, I'm very concerned still at the rate at which unemployment is actually increasing in the towns. I mean, I think I've got some figures here which are provided from Kent Analytics, where it seems to suggest that we are in fact deteriorating very sharply on that front. Now, I don't know what your view is, whether it's simply the tax changes that this government has caused, which has been, but I don't see much sign of growth in terms of employment there, and I think this is very serious. And one of the things I'd like to see is, do we have really, and perhaps we do, in which case please, but do we have an employment plan in the sense that we know these areas, we have as an authority and a partner in this, some kind of overview of where we think these figures are going to go in Medway, so that actually we can start to get a handle on, well, how do we actually tackle those particular areas. And I think that is something which I would find quite useful. The third thing is that on the university front, I'm very pleased to see that we're continuing to work with the universities very well. And I think that one of the things which I think is a very much of a, how can I put it, I think we need to get closer and closer to the universities in terms of them thinking of a natural situation. I mean, when they started out, the universities, when they came to Medway, it was really, they were educating in Medway and getting jobs outside. Most jobs were outside of Medway. And the reason for that was simply twofold, really. One was that the skills that they were learning at university weren't allied with the jobs that were available, etc., etc. Now, I'm just wondering whether we have a joint plan now with the universities to actually make sure, if you like, I mean, the ideal situation, and obviously it wouldn't happen, but the ideal situation is that everybody works in Medway comes out of the university. Well, obviously that's not going to happen because, for a lot of different reasons. But I think it'd be very interesting to know, and again I come back to these evidence of success, to know how it rates. In other words, if they're doing, for example, say X thousand students a year, how many of those are actually coming into employment? How much are we losing? And what do we think we can do to actually working with the universities to bring that figure still closer? And I just wondered if you'd like to comment on that, Bobby. Really, I think the other thing which I don't see here very much is what was mentioned earlier, which is this question of our proximity to the continent. You very rightly, I think, pointed out our position in relation to London and how we use that position very well. But I think that what we need really is to consider, particularly with various changes now that friend Trump is bringing in to try
sorry,
and...
Could you repeat that? So is our proximity to where?
Pardon? Approximately to the continent.
To the continent? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I think that's what I'm concerned with, because I think that we ought to be able to take advantage of the fact, effectively, that we're midway between the centre and the continent, not simply as a place where lorries go through quickly, but actually where we're doing business with the continent, as we have a number of businesses, we haven't got enough. And I just wonder how we can really promote ourselves on the continent and which areas, which sectors we should be promoting ourselves in, and whether we are doing that at the moment as much as we should be. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Once again, another wide-ranging set of questions. However, I'll go backwards if I can.
Yeah.
Promotion as how the continent views us, that largely sort of is being dealt with, but it shouldn't just be through tourism. So how we're working with Visit Kent, locating Kent, etc. And so we're having some very fruitful conversations about what we can do to improve that. The increase of visitors since Brexit and COVID, and how to sort of capitalise on that, but also how that's changed and how it's less about sort of finding sort of coach parks for large coach firms, because they don't exist in the same way. Not to say that they're not there at all, but it's not like it was before. So proximity to the continent in terms of tourism is certainly being looked at. It's also being looked at within KMEP as well, so within partnership with Kent, because it's, this area means something to us. However, if you live in Lyon, for example, and you want to come up to Medway, you're going to perhaps know Kent. We really have to locate ourselves in that context, and so that's why a lot of that is within partnership and working with KMEP, and that is on the agenda consistently, if only, and it's not only, but if it was only, in terms of opening up sectors that were once traditionally more continental. So, for example, I'm talking about the wine industry and how that's growing in Kent, and how that's a growth area and of interest from our neighbours, but that will then open up for other day visits into Medway. So that conversation certainly happening. It would be easier if there was a forum that we could all, work with within Europe, but that's, let's not go there. In terms of the universities opening up, that conversation as well is happening. So I'm certainly meeting with university. I've got some in the diary, but have already met with various people in Kent University, and how to open it up. But part of the difficulty is actually geographic. Now, I don't want to make everything about maps, but the issue with some of the universities, which, one of the greatest impacts that the last Labour government had in Medway by actually bringing in the universities in the first place, where they're located is actually by foot quite difficult to sort of approach. So one of the things that we're looking at is how to open up that sort of corridor, and there are some interesting ideas of how to do that. I don't know to what extent that's out in the public, but we are looking at ways to break that that barrier a bit, and so we are having conversations with the university on that. In terms of employment figures, those are usually dealt with within KMEP as well, so that's covered. So do we have sort of a sector by sector analysis within Medway of unemployment, and that work is sort of largely under under KMEP as well. But I sort of refer you back to the comments that I made to Councillor Lawrence's question about unemployment. The concerns are there, and there's the national picture, of course, which we, and also international picture, that we are unable to influence in any great effect. Statistics, I couldn't sort of back sort of the inclusion of statistics more. In fact, I would. But the problem is that I have to recognise that by doing so, there is a potential, as much as I would like there to be statistics on every page, actually there is where we probably need to do is find a sort of a happy medium where operationally we have the statistics to hand, and what we're doing with Medway 2.0 and what we're doing with as a council to be able to have to hand statistics that are meaningful and relevant is very useful. But I would say the extra workload and the extra hours, the extra operational hours that are required to fill report after report after report with statistic after statistic after statistic, that will then possibly not get read, really has to be sort of measured against the usefulness of them. Say again? The key statistics.
Yeah, rather than a whole load of them. I think there are a number of drivers there that really you can use to measure, and there's an awful lot of information that actually one can spend a lot of time collecting, and at the end of it, it doesn't actually improve any performances.
I mean, yes. Councillor Doe, I'm sure we can take suggestions, but what key statistics would you in particular be interested in reviewing?
I'm particularly interested, obviously, in the amount of new businesses that we attract each quarter. If we do, whether in fact we are actually running with the national average on employment or not. In other words, are we really, improving, doing things that actually beat the trend, if I may put it that way? I think these are the kind of statistics. There are other things, but I think if you think about it in terms of, as I say, fishing in a market where we compete with other people, I think what we need is a solid statistical base that actually we can produce those numbers and prove that we are actually, if this is true, more successful than others. And if we aren't more successful than others, then what do we do we live with that, or do we actually decide that we can improve it by taking certain steps? That's the reason why I wanted the statistics.
If I may, Chair, historically, it has been incredibly nigh on impossible to get a set of statistics for companies, despite the fact that Companies House exists. If you troll through Companies House, actually the number of them, the data is just completely out of date and it just doesn't relate to anything on the ground, is a real issue. So the issue that we're facing is a reliable set of data to gather. Even the ONS struggles. Where that data does exist and where we have invested is a private set of data which we can look at. Now that is something that we are looking at precisely for the reasons that you've outlined. Happy to get back to you about that and see whether that sandbox, that set of data would be something that would meet the requirements.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. And also item 7, I think we'll be discussing the monitoring report as well, so we can review some of those statistics in that section. Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to go over to Councillor Cook for a proposal here.
Thank you. So firstly, the committee asked to note the report. I think I've got 3 recommendations for us as a committee. The first is a request for a report on the UK SPF work and the outcomes to be brought back to the committee. The second is a briefing note, re the transport and traffic impacts of the Lower Thames crossing, and just summing up that conversation, a request for the development of some key data-driven performance indicators to be brought forward in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Would that be a private briefing or a member's item? Briefing. Okay, yes, we can amend that. Thank you. Okay, on that note, is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, well, that's been a very long and fruitful scrutiny, so I suggest we take a 10-minute break.
Can I thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to come and discuss the report? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, thank you, committee. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the bus service improvement plan. So I'm going to pass over to Michael Edwards to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very pleased to have the opportunity to discuss Medway's bus service improvement plan with members this evening. Bus travel is really important in Medway. It helps us meet our policy objectives by promoting sustainable growth, reducing congestion, and improving air quality. As our population grows, efficient bus services alongside walking, cycling, and river transport will be essential in accommodating growth without overwhelming our roads. Public transport is also a key part of our wider strategy to reduce carbon emissions and promote greener travel options. In terms of the BSIP, we've made good progress so far, thanks to the work of Rob here and the team, the portfolio holder, and the collaboration with our bus operators. We've increased bus service frequencies and improved infrastructure, such as improving facilities at the bus station and upgrading bus shelters and bus stops across Medway. We've prioritised the implementation of parking controls that make bus access easier, and our free bus travel weekends and enhanced evening and Sunday services have generally been well received and complement the bus fare initiatives funded by national government. It is fair to say, though, that we still face challenges. The overall punctuality rate for buses in Medway ranges between 75% and 87%. This is typical when compared to other non-metropolitan areas of the UK, but we are behind areas like London, Greater Manchester and the West Midlands. So improving the punctuality and reliability of our bus services remains a priority for us, and this is borne out by a national survey data, where overall satisfaction with bus services in Medway remains stubbornly around 50%, which we want to improve to over 60% by 28-29. So, to address these challenges, we plan to further enhance bus service frequencies, particularly during evenings and weekends, and improve the quality of passenger information. We're also focusing on infrastructure improvements through our emerging local bus infrastructure plan. The plan will identify key bus corridors where we can consider changes to the highway that support our bus network to a greater extent than it does now. So traffic management schemes, bus priority measures, traffic signal changes, removing bus laybys, improving bus stops and shelters, all those things will help us achieve faster and more reliable bus services, growing patronage and making public transport a more attractive option for our residents. All of this can only be done by collaborating with the operators and other stakeholders, and our BSIP and our enhanced partnership provide the mechanism for doing that. Our bus operators must play their part in terms of vehicles, ticketing and driver training, and as a council we can deliver and maintain infrastructure, try to minimise the impact of roadworks and ensure our enforcement mechanisms support bus operation. So by continuing to work collaboratively and focusing on these key areas, we can create a modern and sustainable transport network that meets the needs of our communities now and into the future and also supports our environmental goals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any members? Okay, Councillor Howcroft-Scott, one with her hand up first.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you, really, because obviously Mr. Carman, Rob, does update us, and I feel I tend to ask silly questions because I don't really know much about transport. I have a biochemistry degree. But my question is, how confident are you that our buses are becoming more efficient? They continue to deliver stability and reliability for all of our people of Medway. So that's the question one. Question two, I note that we're having newer European V5, V6 engines, and we've had 8 new buses last autumn. What is the rolling programme of that? And then finally, you know, we're only 9 months into a Labour government, but already there's been a lot of work on transport. We're about streamlining franchises when they work and tweaking, strengthening, enhancing partnerships. You know, recently I've got friends from uni up in Manchester and I was really impressed with what I saw there. I wondered how that would look in Medway if and when that happens. And then finally, fantastic to see so many young people and children on the buses, especially when it's free and, you know, you have those weekends. How are we tackling, or if there is any, antisocial behaviours that the bus drivers and actually the general public might have to endure? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll try to come back on some of those, and I think Rob might help me out with a few of the questions as well. So the first one was around stability and reliability and making sure that we promote and encourage that. And that is true, and I think it's fair to say in Medway we do have a relatively stable network. And certainly when you compare it to other areas of Kent and beyond, where services have been reduced over the past few years, certainly since the pandemic. So we've been able to maintain a relatively stable network. You don't see huge swathes of service cuts in Medway. And in terms of our budgets, administrations have consistently applied the budgets that we have available for supporting services and concessionary fare travel as well. So we are in a good place in Medway, but as we sort of allude to in the report, and as I mentioned in my introduction, we do have challenges as well in terms of reliability. There are challenges in terms of reliability, but we are kind of on a level with many other non-metropolitan areas in terms of the data. But that means we must improve as well. So we need to aspire to the sort of 80-90% reliability rates that you see in places like Manchester, West Midlands and London, which actually has pretty much near a 90% reliability rate. So there's a lot of work to do. And what we do in the report, we set out some of the things that we can do. And I think infrastructure delivery is really important because that has such a big impact on bus service reliability and the perception of public transport as well. So some of those measures that we are looking at to improve highway infrastructure will help to support the reliability of bus services moving forward. And we've got to spend this money quite quickly as well. So we're not looking at years and years to deliver on an infrastructure plan. It's going to be quite swift in terms of the things that we're starting to put in on the ground as well. In terms of you asked a question about vehicle upgrades. I might ask Rob if you could give some information on, because I know some of the operators have been dealing with that. Yeah, so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as I say, Arriva introduced 8 new buses last year, Euro 6. I think the very oldest Euro 3 buses, only a handful left, the old 2004 plate vehicles, the old double-deckers going around. I think going forward, a lot will depend on government sort of targets on the phasing out of diesel vehicles and sort of support coming from national government as well. I think to upgrade our fleet of vehicles, you're looking at there's about 120 odd vehicles, so £500,000 for an electric bus, plus any sort of infrastructure cost for charging. It's a massive sum of maybe looking at £60–70 million, and I think you'd need significant private investment and or public investment to support that.
Thank you. You also asked a question about franchising and partnerships. Obviously, we're obviously not in a franchise. We are part of an enhanced partnership with our operators at the moment, so that collaboration is there. In terms of franchising, that's still an ongoing discussion, really, about how it could work in Medway. One option is where you don't actually franchise the whole network. You franchise parts of the network that you might have particular issues or concerns about that might work better under a franchising arrangement. But those conversations are still ongoing in terms of that particular aspect. Yes, it's really important to encourage young people to use our bus services in Medway. And yes, there can be antisocial behaviour issues there. We do work closely with the operators as part of that, and so our yellow bus services, for example, they all have CCTV cameras on board, and we're seeing that on regular bus services as well at the moment. And we've also upgraded security at some of our bus stops as well. And I'm thinking here in terms of the new CCTV system we've got at the bus station. So the quality of that is absolutely fantastic, and at night as well. So that really promotes a sense of safety and security for bus users. So yes, it is a key factor. We're always looking at that particular issue and how we might introduce or work with operators to resolve those issues as best we can.
Thank you, and thank you for your comprehensive, easy-to-read report. I just subbed for this committee tonight, and it was really, user-friendly to read, so appreciated.
I just had a comment.
Sorry, yeah. Chair, can Rob just come in on another comment there?
I think it's because Medway's network's been relatively stable. A part of that is that we do support Arriva with the concessionary fare travel. A lot of authorities just reimburse on the numbers that are travelling. What we do with Arriva is agree a fixed price arrangement each year, which does give them the confidence to keep services on the road. That knows their income coming forward. It helps us support us with our income as well. So, I mean, you think ENCTS, or the older person's travel, still about 70% of pre-COVID level. So that's a national thing, not just in Medway. So I think a lot of the bus companies have struggled for income and have struggled for sort of returning passengers. And I say, like, the last 5 years, we've certainly seen different sort of patronage changes and different sort of patterns of travel. So I think, as an authority, I know Arriva sort of do appreciate what we do, and I think we've tried to do incremental small steps to try and support the network and add services where we feel they're appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, and next is Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your report. However, there are a couple of things I wish to bring to your attention, especially in terms of where you're talking about routes serving the Hoop Peninsula, Cliff and Cliff Woods, which is part of my ward. The service there has not improved at all. In fact, it's actually got worse. And why I have such a major concern about this is because the residents there, not the council, are paying for that service. As part of the 106 agreements for all the development that's taken place out there, tens of thousands of pounds have been placed within this council to provide that extra bus service and bus stops which have not materialised in the last 3 years. Now, I've checked with those developers even recently to say, have you actually paid this money over? Yes, they said. And then I've come back to my residents and say, well, we've had no improvement in our bus service. In fact, it's worse. And even when we talk about having extra provision in the evening and weekends, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a rural bus in the evening and weekends. So, I take real umbrance about what you're stating in your report. In terms of the buses themselves, the creaky old things belching out dirt and smoke going out into those areas is absolutely incredible. How can that be a sustainable form of transport? And it's certainly not sustainable if what actually we've got is social exclusion here, because if people in the rural areas want to go into town by bus, that means it's 10 o'clock in the morning if they're lucky to get one, because the buses early in the morning are taken up by school children. So 10 o'clock, if they're lucky, means they get maybe an hour or two in town, and then they've got to start queuing for a bus that may or may not appear to get back before the service ends. So I'd really like you to look at your report again and actually come forward with actually true figures. Thank you.
Thank you. I imagine you've got an announcement to make on Cliff Woods and services to them.
Yeah. Drum roll. Yeah. No, it's absolutely right that it has taken some time to organise the Section 106 funded services to Cliff Woods. But as you know, Councillor Etheridge, we did an engagement piece with the parish council and people out in that area, and those services, those additional services, will be commencing very soon. Do we have a date for those, Rob?
The 27th of April, there's going to be a half-hourly shuttle service to Strood, and also the half hourly to Strood, so the 133 will be hourly to Chatham, also hourly to Strood, so it'll dovetail into half-hour service to Strood, and also becoming an hourly service on Sunday. I think the key thing to remember here is that a lot of these developer contributions come through that they're drip-fed on when house numbers are completed. So you almost need to bank a lot of the money up to actually start a worthwhile service. And I think the other thing to bear in mind as well is that, like an evening service, you probably look at £80,000–90,000 a year for an evening bus service. We have to think, is that best value for money if initially a handful of people are using it? So we can maybe use that money somewhere else, a different part of the day, different part of the week, which get more people using it. So it's just getting the balance right and the best use of the money.
And just to come back on the infrastructure. Sorry.
Coming on. So basically what you're saying is we're robbing the rural areas to pay for a service somewhere else because it doesn't get used that much. And it doesn't get used that much because it's totally unreliable.
I think what we're saying here is that Section 106 contribution was ring-fenced to buses serving Cliffwoods. So in that particular case, where funding is ring-fenced to a particular service or a particular location, it will only be used for that service. Of course, there are wider challenges around rural bus services, and there have been for many years, in terms of promoting use, encouraging use. Generally, those services have been subsidised by local authorities, which sometimes means that the budgets available don't support high frequencies. So yes, that is certainly a challenge, but it is good news in terms of Cliffwoods because those frequencies will be actually pretty good for a village of that size, and certainly we hope that it will encourage bus patronage. So when that Section 106 funding runs out, it will be there will be sufficient patronage to make it a viable service. In terms of the infrastructure, we also, as you know, probably we received some infrastructure for upgrading some of the bus shelters and stops in Cliffwoods, and I've seen the designs for those, so they will be coming forward very shortly.
One question, if I may. If we're actually going to do a loop from the Peninsula and Cliffwoods into Strood and then another bus onto Chatham, does that mean they pay two fares, or is it one single fare they can pay to go all the way through with the maximum bus fare as it is?
I think in that situation, you'd probably be a Medway day ticket option, maybe around, I think, the £7.10 mark. Obviously, older people would get their free bus passes, but yeah, it'd be £7.10 for a day ticket.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I was a bit distraught when I saw one document and then there was another strategy document on top. I thought I'd got through the first one, and then there was the second one. So I'm interested in Councillor Howcroft-Scott managed to find it all so clear. I had some more, hopefully more strategic questions. There were a number of free bus weekends, which I think is great, but has that improved the long-term take-up of using the bus, or are people just taking advantage of those free weekends, but actually we don't see any increase in bus use? I was a bit confused. In terms of ticketing, is every time, I think this goes to Councillor Etheridge's point, if you get on an ASD bus and then get on a Arriva bus, that's two tickets, two fares. There is no one ticket that covers the whole of Medway. And if I was going from Hempstead to Maidstone, for example, am I able to buy one ticket that covers that whole journey? So I was just interested in ticketing. I'm interested in the demographics, who's using the bus at the moment. I'm also interested, have we actually asked users what they want from a bus service rather than asking them to comment on the bus service? So I've been a little bit more proactive, i.e., what would make you use the bus more often, other than if it was free, I'd use it all the time. And the other thing is, in terms of technology, is there a Medway bus app that covers all users? Can I track my bus if I've got the bus stop outside my house? Do I have to go stand outside and wait for it to turn up, or can I finish my coffee because I know it's actually 10 minutes away? And on that sort of link point, in Hempstead, you cannot get a mobile phone a data signal whatsoever because all the data's sucked out by the M2. We don't even have 4G. And, some of this stuff to make, for me, making bus use more attractive is that I can track my bus, I can see it's at the end of the road, and I, take my way to the bus stop. There is some inequality in bus fares for children. Children who get the Arriva bus from Hempstead to, say, Rochester, they pay a much higher bus fare than the MY bus, which is much more subsidised, and I think that's unfair. I think children using a bus for school should pay the same fare, whether it's an Arriva bus or it's an MY bus. The MY service is absolutely fantastic, and I think if all buses were the same as the MY bus, you'd have much more take-up, to be fair. What else? Last questions. Just prove I've read the report, Councillor Field. I'm wondering whether our choices on using our capital grant. So I understand we have to upgrade things like toilets for bus drivers because otherwise they're not going to want to do the job and all of that. But I wonder whether we should be spending more money unblocking the blockages in the road network. So I noticed Sharsted Way is on there. There's that horrible right turn into Mears Court Road, which is an absolute nightmare. Whilst it's nice to have beautiful bus shelters with bright screens and people announcing, an AI voice announcing that your bus is 5 minutes away, if you get on that bus and it takes you 45 minutes longer to get to your destination, what would make people use the bus more often? And I'm concerned, particularly at the Hempstead end, where we've got Gibraltar Farm and Lidsing developments, how we're going to provide the extra buses because the roads are atrocious. And I wonder if potholes, be interesting to get some feedback from the bus companies on the state of the potholes. I've had a number of conversations with officers about being a bit more strategic about road repairs, especially where there's lots of heavy traffic. So, I know there's a real smorgasbord of questions there, but anything you can do would be brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence, and obviously, you know my job's in bus priorities, so thank you for feeding into that. And also interesting to hear you propagating some arguments for bus franchising as well in that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back on some of perhaps the high-level stuff, and maybe Rob can feed into some of the things around ticketing, free bus weekends, and the Medway app and stuff like that. In terms of the capital investment, it's £2.5 million, and the bus infrastructure plan is doing that evidence-based work to identify what the issues are on the network, what the shortages of infrastructure are, and how we can start to address those. And a number of the measures are listed in the report. But it's a very fair point that actually traffic congestion affects everyone. It's not just buses. So there will be some crossover with schemes that either are on our books or would be part of our traffic management considerations anyway. And Mears Court is a really good example of that because we have a live scheme that we're working on now that actually, subject to consultation, we'd like to build this year to improve that right turn in there. Now, that is a scheme that will improve traffic for all users, but it will also have a very positive impact on buses as well. And actually, that's almost like a panacea for me because that will improve the situation for everyone. But there will be cases where we are looking at specific bus infrastructure as well to improve specific conditions. So it's quite a flexible approach. We are looking at congestion hotspots, we're looking at key corridors, and some of those measures that we put in to help buses will help other modes of traffic as well. So, for example, one of the things we've been talking about today is upgrading some of our pedestrian crossings to puffins. So they are actually very responsive, so they cancel the signal if the pedestrian has moved off. So that's another example of something that can benefit buses, but it can benefit other forms of traffic as well. So hopefully that provides some reassurances on that. In terms of what was the other? Consultation. Now, clearly, when we went through the BSIP process and adopted the BSIP, there was a consultation process. It was widely available, and we took comments on that. And it would be the same with the infrastructure plan. I think it's right that we have, we produce the infrastructure plan and then we have a time to reflect and ask people actually, you know, what do you think of this plan? Does it chime with you in terms of making things better for bus travel across Medway? So there will be consultation and engagement opportunities at that stage as well, but also when we actually come to deliver schemes. So there's kind of there's two ways of engaging on that. So Rob, did you want to come back on some of the ticketing stuff?
Yeah, I think it's about the all-day Medway ticket. We're actually discussing with operators as part of our bus operators meetings an enhanced partnership to set up an old Medway ticket. Obviously, the issue we have here, because Arriva's 93% of the market, I need to get them to agree to anything. So all the other smaller ones generally agree to it because they're supported contracts. I need Arriva to agree to it as well. We're speaking with them, getting some legal contracts drawn up. So hopefully we can launch it this year sometime and be like a ticket with a QR code you can sort of use on each bus. But the NY buses, yeah, they've been a fantastic success. I mean, the waiting lists are still going through the roof, and I think it's a legacy thing. They was introduced maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I think, to be fair, we probably charge too low a price for them. And I think looking at the commercial price of a season ticket, it should be a lot higher. But I think to subsidise all student travel to that extent would be a massive pot of money to use. So that'd have to be consideration for the council who wishes to do that. Let's say we had consultants looking at the BPIP bus infrastructure plan, and we've got some great schemes coming forward, shelter-wise, junction-wise, and some improvements down the bus station to improve safety and reliability for bus operators and the passengers. So hopefully, after this year, we're hopefully getting a 3-year funding stream as well, so we can start to put the foundations here for the next 3 years or so.
In terms of the free bus weekends and the patronage?
Yeah, the free bus weekends, I think we've roughly had about 60,000 people using them. I think overall we're inching towards 8 million bus passengers this year. We've got a target of 9 million, so we are quite hopeful that these taster weekends give people a flavour of using the bus. We haven't done any research after the event of those people return to the bus, but I think just anecdotally speaking to bus drivers, they have seen people come aboard the bus, they've used the bus one weekend and they've seen them the following week. We are seeing new bus users coming to them.
Chair, it's just one more follow-up question, very short one. I do note your point about Arriva have got a very big share in the Medway market. Is there any ways of promoting a bit more competition amongst operators? Or is it the other operators just aren't interested in some of the routes that Arriva are currently using or servicing? Thank you.
I think to be fair, in the past we have had indications from Stagecoach in the east of the county. Pre-pandemic they set up an O2 Medway bus service. On our framework agreement, Brighton and Hove buses on our framework agreement, so did look at the market here. I think for any new entrant to come in, though, it would be a massive undertaking, setting up depots from scratch, setting up the infrastructure from scratch to serve Medway. So I think it's just how the deregulated market formed since the 1980s that a lot of buses merged together. So we support the smaller ones. When we do these free bus weekends and supported contracts, we try and spread the workload around. So it's important to us. We don't want to reave an absolute monopoly because we need them to be tested. We need them to stay honest, so to speak.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to put the converse point because it's good to have competition of ideas as well, but actually, for our passengers, do they really care who operates the bus network? Don't they just want a reliable, affordable, accessible, frequent service? And actually, in terms of social cohesion, social benefits and economic benefits, as Councillor Mayhill in his in his answer to my question earlier said, one of the threats to Medway's economy and economic success is the lack of reliable public transport and a lack of usage on that, and that's a barrier to our economic success. Should we be also, people, Councillor Halcroft-Scott has mentioned Manchester, but the one I'm interested in is Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which actually is medium-sized towns that are of similar size and economic performance to us. Is there not a case that actually, and this is about devolution, this is wider things, but actually Medway might be better served through a franchise agreement and cross-subsidy of the profitable routes supporting the less profitable routes, for instance, and that might be what our residents want, as opposed to more, just having to decide whether to get a stagecoach ticket or an Arriva ticket. Sorry, that was probably less of a question, but let's
In the exchange of good ideas here, Councillor Field, you proved yourself what a bus nerd you really are. So, if we went down the single operator route, the danger is that the rest, you eliminate the competition, there's no one to come in. You end up with a monopoly, whether it be a public monopoly or a private monopoly. If that monopoly doesn't perform, you've got no leverage in which to go to them. If you don't pull your boots up, we're going to get rid of you because you've dealt with the competition. I think I don't see competition on individual routes. We have routes allocated to operators, so it's not a case of whether you make a decision to go on an Arriva bus or an ASD bus. You do an Arriva bus for that part of the journey, you do an ASD bus for that part of the journey. And I actually wonder, if we look at the defranchising of trains, the service has gone down since the defranchising of trains. So let's not get into that argument. What we really need to focus in on is making sure our buses meet the needs of what our residents say. So, and I think these reports are really good reports. I think it gives us an overview, but I'm not convinced, officers can shoot me down in flames, that we're actually necessarily asking the right question. I think we're asking the question about what do you think of the service, but I do think we should ask the question, what would you want from the service, and then make sure that that is built into contracts that go. But actually, getting kids on the buses at early stage is definitely the right way to go, because people, if you think about human behaviour, once they start doing stuff, it becomes the norm for them. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence, I think we agree on 90%, and there are certain models that different companies can bid for franchises in different ways to do that, and good contracts can do that. So, absolutely, I suspect poor officers here are listening to comments going to and from. So, I'm not sure if there is a comment that you want off of that exchange, or whether it's probably best that I throw to Councillor Jackson. If there's Rob, if you want to.
I think it's to bear in mind, we don't use our supported, all ASDs and new venture services are supported services, they're council contracts. So we don't want to use money to sort of compete on a commercial route, and there'd be sort of commercial implications, and CMA could get involved with the Markets Authority, so we've got to be very careful how we use the supported money. I think with franchising as a whole, I think potentially could be something when and if we have like a Kent and Medway combined transport authority at some stage, similar to West Midlands, similar to Bristol, similar to Cornwall. I think the Manchester example is a very interesting one in the sense that a lot of money was spent in Manchester, and an interesting thing is a lot of the smaller operators went out of business there and lost a lot of work. It's been monopolized by the big sort of corporate companies. So I think franchising can be sometimes seen as maybe a utopia in some eyes, but I think it does have its pros and cons.
Absolutely, and one thing is getting the data correct. So also just take advantage of technology. I know that there's companies out there that are using more AI to get hold of data, more open data as well that can do that. And I think another point is that it's the competition with. It's not just competition within bus industry; it's with other options as well, and that's the wider point. I'm going to apologise to Councillor Jackson because you've probably been waiting for a while to answer the question.
Thank you, Chair. Just like I wait for the buses, it's okay. But I wasn't going to say. I was going to say, Michael, Rob, I think you have such a tough job, because I think Rob was the first person I did my ward surgery, and every time I do ward surgery, it is transport and parking, like that. They're the top two, apart from the Healthy Living Centre, but that's a different story. I grew up in London. I don't drive. I always use public transport. I always use trains. Love public transport. And Medway, I know I live out in Who. It's always been trouble, to the point where, as Councillor Lawrence just said, to get 2 buses, because I always have to go into Chatham to come back out again. And if there's 2 of us, if I'm with my daughter, I might as well get a cab, because it's the same, and I'm going direct rather than going in to go back out again. And I want to use the buses, I really want to, but they, just tell you one example. I got the bus to Chatham bus station. I was due to do an award celebration at Mid-Kent. My bus was supposed to come every 20 minutes. I'd been waiting there for an hour and a half, and it kept coming up that the next one was due, and then it went past it, and it just didn't, they just didn't turn up, and it was raining, and I had to go home and get changed. And now I'm thinking I'm just going to walk to Mid-Kent, like in my jeans, because this is getting unbelievable. And I went, and this is the thing, it's about information. I went to ask somebody what's going on with the bus. Why is it taking so long? And he just looked me up and down and said, you know you have to bring a packed lunch if you want one of our buses. And I wasn't in the mood, like normally I laugh and joke, but I wasn't, because I was late for this award ceremony that I then, I literally then got a cab and went home and got changed. So I just don't get buses anymore, because they're not reliable. The only time I will get a bus is if I've got ward surgery and I'm going to visit my mum, and I go to Rochester train station, because it's a nice little link. So please, I don't know how we do it, get information out there. If I knew that bus was going to be an hour and a half late, I wouldn't have stood there. I would have gone and made alternative arrangements. But for the information to come up and say it's coming, the next one's due in 11 minutes, and I watched it go down, and then the bus just never turned up. It was, look, I know these are individual things, but I think I want to use my buses. I really want to use the buses like I do anywhere else. I know you're doing your best, but...
I think you've hit on some key themes there, haven't you, that form a fundamental part of our bus service plan. And our collaboration with operators, and I think bus information is absolutely crucial. And this was something the deputy leader raised with us the other week at our active travel group as well. So there are a lot of personal experiences about inadequate information that isn't updated, that isn't provided in the first place. The point was made that not everyone has access to an Arriva app. In terms of being able to access that information in that particular way. So this is something that is I know Rob's doing a lot of work at the moment in terms of real-time information and how we could look to improve that, starting at the bus station, but rolling that out on our key corridors as well. So absolutely, that will be a factor. The other point you touched on was the direct nature of services, particularly out to the Who Peninsula, and I know in the context of the emerging local plan, and what sort of mitigation we need for areas of Medway to accommodate sustainable growth. There are conversations going on about fast track as well, in terms of that successful service in Kent, potentially coming out towards Medway, and we've identified some corridors basically from the peninsula down into Rochester, Strood and Chatham as potential things to think about in terms of any expansion of fast track. So all those things you've raised, yeah, we're absolutely aware of them, and they are part of a longer strategic piece to look at how we can resolve those.
Just one question that follows on a little bit from that theme. So you're talking about good to see the capital spending good to see that we're trying to improve reliability that should reduce journey times. I know recently that Arriva have put extra buses in because of the unreliability of the network and to maintain the demand and the timetables. Have we got commitments from them, and probably less so other operators because they're lower frequency routes, that if we achieve what we hope to achieve in the delivery of this bus service, improvement plan, particularly the capital spend, they will increase frequencies and do that virtuous cycle as opposed to the vicious cycle?
Yeah, we know that in conversation with Arriva, when they go to their head office to seek funding for new buses and seek funding for further new services, if we can prove as a local authority it's a good investment, it's reliable, they can get a return on their investment. That's how they got with the 8 new buses this autumn. So they've seen the red routes in Raynham, they've been effective. And so I think it can be proved that if we put our side of the bargain up, that they will do their side of the bargain as well.
And do we use the enhanced partnership process to say these are the areas that we're getting lots of correspondence on, and these are the areas where we're seeing growth, and then this is where we want to be strengthened?
Yeah, we speak to Reeve on a weekly basis, so any issues that crop up, I've got a direct line to the area manager, the commercial manager, so we can deal with things pretty quickly. For example, we had the Luton Road closure this week, or last week just gone. We was able to use our new tannoy system to get information out to the public as soon as possible. So it's little things like that which are incrementally, we hope, improving things for passengers.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Hi, yeah, it's another one about everywhere going to Chatham all the time. I've got residents in some of the almshouses who'd like a bus from Borstal area to Strood, which is where they want to go shopping. As it is, they have to get a bus and then change, and these are elderly people. And they did work up a petition, but it wasn't in the right format, at which point they gave up. But yeah, it's just all the routes seem to be looking at to fit in with what people are actually, what they're actually doing, rather than, how it is at the moment.
Majority of the bus network is a commercial bus operation, so Arriva will make the decision on what routes they wish to operate, the timings and the routes. Obviously, we will step in as a council to fill the gaps in the commercial network. We know we have the 156 service from Borstal into Queen Mother Court, into Strood and Chatham, but I think to introduce new routes, it probably would need council support and council funding up front, and so that'd be a question for us to decide going forward. Do we want to? It's a pretty big risk, and you often get the complaint, well, why are we putting money into buses which are running around empty as well? So we have to make any new routes we look at, make them value for money, and make sure we're using the money in the right way. But I do take your point, because we're 5 main centres, most journeys do involve a change at Chatham, which may not be the most convenient thing for some journeys. So in an ideal world, I think we need more cross-town journeys and cross-town routes going on, but it's something to look at.
I think that would be very useful. So for instance, the example I can think of, and I know Councillor Croser would probably say the things, using the tunnel connections between Medway Hospital, for instance, and the west of Medway, that they always involve a change. And I would hope that we kind of have a little bit more of a guiding role in saying, actually, taking our public health people or schools and culture people to actually look more holistically and say, actually, these are what we want to achieve with a bus network, not just rely on, as Councillor Maple would often say, a bus network that's based on a dockyard and a traditional town centre, and actually think what is Medway and what are the connections that we want, and use our enhanced partnerships ahead of other more interventionist partnerships to say, okay, this is what a wider recasting could be, and this make sure that we are advancing a bus network fit for the future. Okay. I'm not sure whether you want to say anything on that. I appreciate it's probably more of a comment than...
Look, I think obviously going forward, we're potentially looking at a new bus hub in Strood as well by the railway station. That could open up some more possibilities. Obviously, operation, you've got to think of where drivers' rest periods would be, drivers' hours as well. So, look at the network has been based on maybe the two depot points of Gillingham and Chatham. Potentially, if other opportunities come to the fore, Strood, we can look at alternative routes as well with Arriva.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the classic examples that can take quicker by public transport from where I am in Strood to the Royal London in Whitechapel than it can to the Medway Hospital. So, you know, we do need to think about that connectivity. Okay. If there's no other questions, can I go to the Vice Chair for a proposal, please?
Of course. So the committee is asked to note the updates provided in the report and the work underway to support the continued delivery of Medway's bus service improvement plan in 25-26.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you, officers, both for coming today. So I appreciate you've had lots of questions flung their way. So I very much appreciate you coming to the committee. Okay, next we're on to item 7, which is the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary for Q3 24-25. I note that there's no officer introduction required as it's taken as read. So is there any members that want to raise any items from this report? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you very much. The very first page of where we're talking about social care, delivering quality social care and community services. And I read through this. So the first question I have, is this a target, something we're looking to achieve, or is it something we're stating that we're achieving now? And if it's the second part, what's the percentage of that achievement? And then I shall come back with a follow-up question.
Councillor Etheridge, can I just confirm, is that specifically about social care?
It is.
Do you know what my follow-up is here? I believe that we're talking about regen, culture and environment, and that's the scrutiny.
Yeah, but it's part of this report, and if it's part of this report and it's not greyed out, then it's part of this committee. Yes, it is.
So which page are you referring to? Just
the very first one, the first one in green.
First one in 165. Okay, if it's in the papers, okay, yeah. Do we want to come back on?
I certainly do. My wife...
Officers, I meant. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, if it's specifically about social care, we can take it back to colleagues in those relevant department and write back to you. I haven't got anyone here who can talk about social care specifically.
Well, I'm just challenging the statements that are there, basically, because they're not true.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to qualify that?
Yeah, you could, if you wish. I think we're getting to that time of night.
Absolutely. So my wife is involved with a charity that deals with people with extreme head injuries, trauma, brain injury, also part of the neurological network. I attend some of those meetings as a guest and listen to them. I'm certainly aware some of the results from that have been passed on to council members, the leader of the council and other members. But most of the ones that have the most difficulty are not being assisted or dealt with. Even a simple thing of somebody with a traumatic brain injury trying to fit in the appropriate paperwork for a PIP or universal credit, or trying to sort out their rates or rent, anything else, difficulties in life. There is no social care coming forward from the council to assist them. They all go to these type of charities, Neurological Network, Who Cares, and other such charities to assist them in that process. And even then, the people who are doing that are not necessarily getting the correct information put in the first place. So they sometimes go through the routine 2 or 3 times before it's resolved. And that's why I'm challenging what it says there about all people are assisted. They're not. The most difficult ones are not. And that's just what I want to bring to your attention.
Thank you. It's a very important issue. We can write a recommendation for those officers specifically to do that. I suspect HASC would have more ability to talk about that in the round, so perhaps speak with a member of your group and make sure that those comments are fed in. Have they considered this report in HASC? Sorry, just to...
It went last week or 2 weeks ago to HASC, yeah, and probably due to the lateness of the hour, no questions were raised at HASC. But
we could certainly cover that as a recommendation and see if that can get action for you and can get an update on that, Councillor Etheridge, because I do agree that's an important issue. Is there anyone? Councillor Campbell.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment as Vice Chair of HASC. These things do come up and they are very robustly scrutinized by the Chair and the committee. All of the various service providers for adult social care, they are called to account. And although the questions were not asked specifically in the last meeting, because there were some other meaty agenda items. So I can assure you that it does come up and it is scrutinized appropriately. Absolutely. I encourage you to watch the recordings as well so you can see what kind of things are being raised and questioned.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Cook also indicated at the same time as Councillor Campbell, then I'll go to Councillor.
Yeah, just a very brief kind of process question, really. I'm curious that some of the areas seem to not have targets, and it says that there's an aim to minimise, but data unavailable due to long-term trends, and I just wondered if I'd understood that correctly, and if so, at what point targets are set and data targets are set. So for example, page 183 I've got in front of me, but there was a few areas where I just wasn't sure where the data wanted us to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to respond to that issue in terms of data points?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's probably fair to say that on some of the indicators, we rely on data from different sources. So in some cases, national sources. In some cases, the data is derived from not necessarily generated by us at the council. So, and those things that we've got greater control of, obviously, we can bring in data on a more regular basis. But obviously, it varies massively because this is so comprehensive. Obviously, the availability and regularity of data varies massively, so we just have to do our best to make sure it's as up to date as possible.
Thank you. If I can just come back on that, I think it really echoes the conversation that was had earlier on Councillor Mayhill's report around kind of key performance data and just that understanding. And I think as I read this, that's where I was thinking back to some of these areas, the nuance of what is us and what is other seems to play in. And so kind of just that request really that where there aren't specific targets, that they are then areas that we'll be discussing at other points in the committee in terms of direction of travel and strategic direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
I had a sort of very similar strategic question. I read this report and I thought, so what's the question I'm supposed to be asking from this report? I noticed there was a lot of data points due March 2025, which after I saw that for about the 13th, 14th time, I sort of lost a bit of interest. Now, I'm wondering how officers are using this report. And, is it driving policy? Is it driving cabinet decisions? Are we getting it really? I mean, I'm wondering how we're scrutinising the information in here. And I think picking up Councillor Cook's point, actually, for example, some of the questions I think we could be asking is looking at things like number of adults going through adult education. Well, how many of those then got jobs? Not they ended up with one qualification and it's like a dead end of the data. And I think this leads in sort of back into what Councillor Doe was trying to say. So my specific question rather than the comment, sorry about the comment, is there a process of reviewing this? Because I was struck, Councillor Cook, by, sorry, Chair, through you, Councillor Cook, that so much of this is reliant on external partners and external data that, how meaningful is it for us sitting in this room at 9:05 on a Wednesday or Tuesday, whichever day it is, looking at this? But my question is there a process of reviewing this so it doesn't get, it's not sort of etched into a lump of granite and we've got to deal with it for the next 4 years? Or is there a process where officers are going, this isn't really working for anyone, or this could be better? I'm just wondering what that process is. Thank you.
It's a really good point, and I think quite rightly it's under constant review. you know, we rely on information like this to make the right decisions at a CMT level. Very aware, and just, you know, just take an example of that I'm quite aware of, you know, around regeneration and economic development as a really good example. You know, so the data that we can generate, adult education as a good example, is really valuable, and the stuff that we hold, you know, goes into great depth and isn't necessarily captured here, but obviously can be provided. But some of those indicators that sit at a more regional level and you know, are less available to us, obviously provide us with less value. So on that basis, absolutely, it's under review, and it does face, you know, a good deal of critique as well. But, you know, where we can get that value, we absolutely do. I think it's quite right that this is as comprehensive as it can possibly be. But it's a point I'll certainly take away in respect of making sure that we've got a keen eye on making it as targeted and as useful as we possibly can get it.
Thank you. No, thank you. It's really useful, and making sure that we've got proper output indicators is the key. I'll just comment that this is the first time that we've got new style of report, and actually it's probably better to digest, because I think quite often the previous ones we ended up going, how many bins are there in my ward, in that edge of the ward, and those necessarily probably weren't useful conversations to have. As much as you know, a strategic list. My one question is looking at Appendix 2 on page 229. So this is your summary of strategic risk performance. And what I note here, and I'm not sure whether I missed it at the last quarter, but the big change has been on the homelessness, and it's gone straight from a C, which is an unlikely, to an A, very likely. And there doesn't seem to have been a trend that it's gone B. It's just gone from unlikely to very likely. How did that happen? What was the big change that made it go in one quarter from C to A?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, we were hoping to complete on a large procurement, and it fell through. So we have based our figures on the assumption, and unfortunately that didn't come through. So it's increased the need to use nightly still. So we aren't hitting those targets where we want to hit around reduction of nightly paid private sector accommodation. But it will be a better position in the quarter one due to acquisition programme coming through.
Okay, so I'm going to ask it first, because obviously I can feel sensitivity and commerciality there.
Yeah.
I think your final sentence might have answered it, but I was a bit worried that you said that there was something that wasn't happening, and then your final sentence suggested it might be back on. Or is it something you've come up with an alternative option? Is it?
Yeah, there's an alternative option, and yes, there's some commercial sensitivity, which is why I can't disclose that any further. But yeah, there is a significant pipeline expected in the imminent future.
Okay, that's useful to know, and I'm sure we'll pick that up at various times when we can speak about it in future.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm looking at these charts on pages 168 onwards, and I know a graph is meant, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I'm at a loss to understand what they're trying to tell us here. We've got on 173, ensure all children and young people across a high-quality, inclusive education by 20.07, by 2027-28, support high-quality education, blah, 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 blah. And all it's got there is a yes. What is this telling us? And the others are similar. I can vaguely understand them, but they don't seem to be telling us much. I would just wonder if somebody could possibly explain it to me. It would be a kindness. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll tell you what, Adam, do you want to pick up that point? I'll tell you what, you can pick it up.
Thank you for the point. It's a really good point. I appreciate the graph's not clear at all and doesn't tell the story that we might want it to tell. So if I can take that away and make sure that we come back with a version of this that provides more complete information, we will.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item at all? Okay. Can I go to the Vice Chair of a proposal reflecting Councillor Etheridge's comments?
Of course, yeah. So, thank you, Chair. Firstly, members are asked to consider the Q3 24-25 progress of performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Secondly, members are asked to note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2 to the report. And I've got two further recommendations. Firstly, the request that specific comments related to social care are responded to by relevant officers. And secondly, for clarification specifically on the graph on page 173.
Okay, is that seconded?
Thank you.
Is that seconded? Yep. And is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, on to item number 8. This is the capital budget monitoring round 3. Andy McNally-Johnson will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the results of the third round of capital monitoring for 24-25. And within the report, we as finance, when we collate it, what we're trying to do here is just give you an awful lot more than just finance. So we're trying to show you for each scheme, with the help of the services, exactly where those schemes are, the progress. And what we try and report is that progress from one quarter to another. So you'll find that in section 5 to the report. Section 4 will give you context for the whole authority. And what you will see is overall for the authority, there's a projected underspend of some £7.6 million. That's against a total budget of £329 million. But RCE has the vast majority of the budget, the capital budget for the whole council. You'll see that it's just under 226 million, and of that, the RCE are projecting an underspend of around 5.25 million over that time. Within section 5, you'll see those variances under certain areas, and hopefully it's self-explanatory. Those sections as well give details of funding as well, so that members can see that. I would say that we also give details of the changes of the budget between one quarter's monitoring and the other, and that helps members to understand how the programme is moving, because unlike revenue, capital tends to change throughout the year as we make changes. We may get grants in, and various grants have been spoken about already, or whether just changes are required, and some of those are made under delegated authority. So I'm happy to try and answer any questions I can. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Chair, thank you. I was just looking at table 2 on page 253. The totals, are those totals right? Because I don't think they are, unless I've missed something. You've copied the top line down to the bottom line.
Okay, so
Or have I missed? Because if I add up the RCE column, it comes to the remaining budget of.
I think the mic's stuck there. Try and talk loudly. You are absolutely right. The figure in the total there is obviously the capital grants line for most of that. I can only apologise. I think BSD is correct. The others are incorrect, and I can only apologise. What I will say is the total of that, and I can assure you, comes to the same amount as the budget. Okay, I apologise. My mistake.
We've all made errors with Excel before, so...
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Andy, I just wanted to be sure that what I was looking at was correct. The 5 million underspend is on the new refuse collection. Are we holding that just as a contingency at the moment, or are we going to release it back to whichever budget it came from? Thank you.
So my understanding is that there's a fair certainty that that underspend will be around the 5 million, but the service just want to check with a few final bills, but it's likely that somewhere around that figure will be saved, yes.
The danger of gold-plated cup holders being introduced because they've got the money sitting there.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, and apologies if I haven't found the right area. We're going to make a decision tonight about additional £559,000 for the Mountbatten House purchase scheme. Could you just clarify, for the purposes of transparency, what exactly that money is spent on and why we're needing to fund that?
What I will say, what we're asking the committee is to note that Cabinet recommended that to full council because that's the governance route we would go through for that. My understanding is with this additional money, there's been some costs that weren't originally anticipated with regards to this. They would include moving tenants from one area to another, but I believe there's some other works that have unfortunately come about, as sometimes happens with here. So yeah, I'm not totally across. It's not an area that I deal with, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak on this item? Councillor Cook.
Sorry, yeah, just a very brief one, just to check my understanding. So a number of the information is really helpful, the written information, and a number of times there's work nearly finished or has been moved to next year. Just for my understanding, can you reassure me that that doesn't mean that there's a saving in this year, but we're then going to have additional expenditure next year? So it's kind of a false saving, or is it money that is going to be marked as spent this year, but the work's going to be done next year, or is it a mixture of both? Thank you.
Perhaps it's worth a distinction on how capital budgets work compared to revenue budgets. Revenue budgets, you set an annual budget, and then the following year you set another annual budget. Capital budgets, due to the nature of schemes, they can go across years. So what will happen is we will, when a budget is approved by council, we will know what the funding streams of that particular budget are, be that capital grants, capital receipts, or even borrowing. So as that scheme progresses, what will happen is officers will look at that and say, okay, in order to finish that scheme, I will be spending this much this year, this much the following year, and maybe into future years. So we will account for that in the same way as we account on an accruals basis. So what we do is, if work is completed in a particular year, that will then be allocated to that year. But obviously, what will happen is if we get to the end of the year, the scheme is not complete, there is more work to be done, that budget, which has already been approved, will be carried forward into the next year along with the funding. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Councillor Cook, I'm going to pass it to you for a proposal.
Wonderful. The committee is asked to note the results of the third round of capital budget monitoring for 24-25. The committee notes that Cabinet recommended to full council the removal of the remaining budget of £7,992 from the building maintenance scheme, as this is now complete. The committee notes that Cabinet recommends to full council the removal of the remaining budget of £100,000 from the mobile library scheme, as this is no longer required with the addition of the Library Improvement Fund scheme to the capital programme. And the committee notes that Cabinet recommends to full council the addition of the £559,000 to the Mountbatten House purchase scheme funded by prudential borrowing to cover the costs of holding the building for onward sale to Medway Development Company. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Somebody second it. Is that approved? Approved. Excellent. Thank you very much. We're now going to go on to item 9, the revenue budget monitoring round 3 for this financial year. Dave Reynolds, your time to shine.
Pressure. Okay, so this report was presented to Cabinet on the 11th of February and summarised the budget monitoring position that's been considered by the Director Management teams based on returns submitted by budget managers for the third round of revenue budget monitoring for 24-25. Across the council, there was an £8.4 million overspend reported, although that was an improvement of just under £2.8 million from the position reported at round 2. Within that, the overall underspend for the areas that are in the remit of this committee was an overspend of around £144,000, and that was an improvement of £1.9 million from the position reported at round 2. I won't do any further. I'm happy to take any questions along with colleagues.
Any members? Go on, Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry, Chair, I know it's getting late, but I'm not doing my job if I don't ask questions, am I? Just following up really on the comment you made about strategic housing and the continued, do we call it pressures, don't we? Call it pressures. The budget, we're now expecting the outturn to be 8.17 million, but for next year we've got 10 million in the budget, I believe, from memory, last time I looked at the budget. Given the issues we've just alluded to, we can't talk about, is that 1.8 million still an accurate number as it sits today, or do we think it's going to get worse?
Can't tell.
10 million's the total. That's not just for temporary accommodation. That covers the whole of my strategic housing service. So everything that's not landlord function comes out of that 10 million. So the pressure is, around 1.8 this year, but we have plans in place to reduce that significantly, including the item I can't speak about at the moment, but also other bits and pieces within a reduction plan that we have for the service, and also a move on plan from out of temporary accommodation.
Thank you. I've just got one question, which I thought you were going to pick, Councillor Lawrence, highways and the underspend. So there's reported an underspend of 575,000. This is on page 284. And it states that most of there was additional spend for highways patching, but a lot of that spend was due to staffing costs, etc. Next year, obviously, there's a big push. Yesterday, wasn't it, around potholes and making sure that we're getting on with fixing that on a national level. With the underspend on staffing, have we got the capacity to be able to deal with that increased investment and expectation around improvements on our roads?
I think that is a question we will probably have to take away and ask directly from the head of highways on that one, if that's okay, Chair.
I'm very happy for that to be taken away and to be a briefing note established. Okay. Are there any other questions on this item? If not, time for a proposal from the Vice Chair.
Thank you. So I've got the committee notes the results of the third round of revenue budget monitoring for 24-25. The committee notes that Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full council, and then that final request for further information regarding the highways expenditure.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. And is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. Item 10 is the petitions report. Has anyone got anything they want to raise on this before I seek a recommendation from the Vice Chair? Okay, Vice Chair, have you got a recommendation?
The committee is requested to note the petition responses and appropriate officer actions in paragraph 4.1 of the report.
Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Okay, and on to item 11. Nicola will introduce the work programme item.
The work programme is attached to Appendix A to the report, and any changes are highlighted in section 4.2 of the report. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Long.
Chair, I know that I was going to bring this up when we agreed the minutes, but I hope this is the right place to bring this up. I still haven't got an answer to my question on whether the cameras that keep an eye on the School Street scheme are left on. It came up back in December. It's a simple yes or no answer unless someone's getting legal advice on the yes or no answer. So I'm not naturally a cynical person, but the lack of an answer is making me ever so slightly cynical tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I note that on page 306, it's already in the actions and it's in red, and there are a number of actions there. So, yeah.
I do think we probably need to, maybe at the pre-meeting, is to push, make sure these answers are coming through. Otherwise, what's the point in asking the questions, to be fair? We're not doing our job as ONS if we're not getting answers to some of these questions.
Councillor Lawrence, appreciated there. There's 4 actions I note that are highlighted in red, and actually this format makes it easier for us to track, and we can raise that through the usual channels as described. Okay, is there anyone else who wants to come in on the work programme item? Okay, well, thank you. So I'll leave to Councillor Vice Chair, Councillor Cook, for a proposal.
The committee is asked to note the report and agree the work programme as set out in Appendix A to the report. The committee is asked to note the action log as set out in Appendix B to the report, and I've got the request to follow up outstanding actions through the usual channels.
Thank you very much. Is that, I've forgotten the word, seconded? Yep, excellent. Is that agreed? Okay, well, thank you very much. Very useful meeting, and that meeting is now closed. Thank you.